when we think about the joy associated with being fully who you are, being free to be fully who you are, I think of a Nina Simone song, I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all these chains holding me. And so sometimes diversity, inclusion, equity, those words, they're part of the academy in some ways, whereas liberation feels part of the people.
The Center for Understanding in Conflict welcomes you to The Other Chair, a monthly podcast exploring the dynamics of conflict and how to bring the human issues to the table. Together with our guests, we explore how the power of understanding each other can lead to better solutions for people on both sides of an issue. We will also share tips for managing your own mediation practice, approaching conflict in the professional world, and ways to apply our understanding-based model in your personal life.
Hello to our listeners and welcome to The Other Chair. My name is James Dyke. Today's guest is Niyonu Spann, founder of Beyond Diversity 101, a workshop which exposes, stimulates, and transforms the dynamics of diversity at the root level. In this episode of The Other Chair, Niyonu joins us to discuss her experience working to advance diversity and liberation as a trainer and facilitator, along with practical advice for how you can be mindful of this work in your practice. Hello, Niyonu, and welcome to The Other Chair.
Hi there. Welcome to me. Welcome to you. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much for being here. I know that you are very busy, much as the center is, conducting a variety of different trainings across the country, work that you've been doing for quite a while now. And I think it would be most helpful for our listeners to jump in and give a little bit of background about the work that you do.
It's funny, I have different expressions of the same work that come through, yes, diversity, inclusion, equity, justice, liberation, all of those words apply. But what is the thread across all of the work I do, whether it's my music or community building work, activism, or the trainings, is I am most interested in creating spaces where people can remember who we are in our interconnection. And that's an abstract notion, so it filters down into words like inclusion and equity. But bottom line, I really want to create spaces for us to remember what we know.
And what inspired you to begin doing this work? And what are the different forms that it has taken since you started?
I was a high school teacher for a number of years. And during one period, I was about 8 years teaching at a boarding school. It was a little bit of a last chance boarding school in Poughkeepsie, New York. And it was a majority white students. My then husband and I were the only two Black folks on the faculty. And there was a dynamic that started to occur, which was students coming to us, students, particularly BIPOC or students of color, coming and telling us about what their experience was, being away from their families, from culture they recognized. And I began to want to respond by creating after school experiences where we could learn more about each other and those dynamics. And I would send away for materials that we could use in these workshops. And there was a common saying at that time, which was racism equals power plus prejudice. And I was one of the folks teaching that. And one day I was sitting on the floor with students looking up at that racism equals power plus privilege. Sexism equals power plus privilege. And I began to wonder, where do I fit in that? It seemed to me that there was an assumption there that I, as a Black woman, had no power. And that's an oversimplification, but it sent me down a path of wondering, what is power? How do we participate in these settings where we're trying to change the power over, power under dynamic? And I began to wonder, do I have a part in upholding systems of oppression at all? And so once I began to ask those questions, the teachers began to show up for me. And I eventually felt led to create Beyond Diversity 101. What that was about was really trying to have enough time, a 5-day experience where we could really get into it and take a look at how are we participating in the very systems that we say we want to change or dismantle.
So the center has a flagship program that it does for 40-hour training for conflict resolution professionals, do lots of other sorts of supportive work around that. And my understanding is for you and the work you do, which takes on many forms, that Beyond Diversity 101 is kind of your equivalent, the real core kind of basic start to this work that can grow into others. Can you talk a little bit more about what that program is like? And then while doing that, could you also address maybe some of the misconceptions that people may have coming in, especially since DEIB has become a buzzword that may not always, with intention or otherwise, lead to real change, but rather be a knee-jerk reaction to address some issues that have come up?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and the reality is that it's DEIBA right now, but there were buzzwords in the late 70s, 80s. They just have shifted. And so the question is for us that are serious about transforming inequities that we see now, transforming the belief in separation that's at the core of U.S. society. If we're serious about that, then we've always got to be looking at what is underneath each of the words. There's a yearning for something. I remember the first time the inclusion was being added to our vocabulary more than just diversity. And inclusion, there was definitely something that we were yearning for, and we don't want to let go of that. But there's something about inclusion that may feel as if it is not giving enough attention to belonging. So then we're like, but we need belong. We need a sense of people feeling like this is theirs, that they truly belong. So in essence, BD 101, from the first night that we arrive, when we're setting the honoring table, I try to start in a way that does not hand out agendas, does not have people introduce themselves in a traditional way, but to bring something of their life and of their, oftentimes people will bring, pictures of grandparents, or I never know what folks will bring, but the invitation is to bring something to bring to the honoring table that represents what you want from these 5 days and represents where you would like to see us go. So from that opening, with setting the honoring table together and giving enough time for each person to come, there's an immediate shift of energy in terms of what people think they're coming to normally with a 5-day retreat or conference. And we pretty much stay in that mode. There is some didactic teaching around terminology. There is some very specific practices in being able to see and name patterns that are taking place in our society that we have seen over and over again, to be able to name that on a societal level, but then also to be able to name that in terms of what we see happening right in the workshop room, to see that I feel triggered when the white man across the room said he's never felt accepted. If I'm triggered by that because I don't feel like a white man should ever be able to say that he has never felt accepted in the world, where do we go with that? Do we shut down the white man from saying that honest feeling that he's had? Or do we also look at, why am I triggered by that, and what is the work that I have to do? So I would say that oftentimes that example that I'm giving right now, in a lot of this DEI work, would shut down and categorize what the white man has said, and would see mainly a lot of the focus would be on educating and sensitizing him. And I'm not saying that does not need to happen, but I feel like me as a Black person being triggered by that is also the healing work, the consciousness raising that needs to happen. And in a nutshell, that is what, for me, Beyond Diversity 101 means. It's going beyond what we learn in Diversity 101. For instance, white fragility. White folks should not be crying in a workshop. That's kind of almost standard understanding at this time in this work. I want to dig into that a little bit more. If we want white folks to not cry, we want them to. I understand what we need to be conscious of in terms of the fragility, but I also feel that part of the issue is white folks desensitizing themselves. So I'm not trying to encourage more shutting down of emotion. And that, in a nutshell, is what this 5-day experience is about.
Conflict manifests itself in many ways in our personal lives, for professionals in the workplace and for practitioners who have made a career bringing together parties in conflict through mediation practice. Each month, the Center for Understanding in Conflict hosts live webinars with featured guests discussing best practices and sharing their experiences for tackling conflict using the understanding-based model.
How have you seen this work change, or has it, over the last 25 years that you've been doing it? Has the general understanding of or demand for this work changed, or is it really just awareness from those that need to be thinking more about it in a meaningful way changed? And what impact are you seeing in the participants and organizations that you work with?
I actually feel like on one level, the work has changed dramatically. There are conversations that we're having in workshops, in trainings, in organizations that we were nowhere near being ready to have, 15, 20 years ago. So we're at a different starting place, both in people's exposure to terminology. I think that, the expansions around gender and sexuality in particular impact the whole way that we're thinking about what it means to be whole, or what we're thinking about and understanding about supporting spaces where people can bring themselves fully. The understandings, or I point partly to terminology because I think that as the terminology changes, as I was saying, even with inclusion and belonging, there's a reason why we latch on to new language. And if you're only focusing, I can go as a Black woman, born in the late 50s, just the way I describe myself has shifted so dramatically, from colored to Negro to Afro-American to African-American. And there's been some resistance to being called Black that has traveled that entire journey. Same thing with this work. What I'm most interested in is radical truth telling. Like, can I, to you, James, can we have really go there in terms of what, I just explained this journey from colored to Black or African American, to have a really honest dialogue about your cultural background and what you know about, whiteness, or what is whiteness, and when did you first have an idea of being white or not being something else? So, I think about this in relationship to what I know about understanding conflict. And in many ways, I think the journeys, the spaces that we're trying to hold are very similar to, let's get down to root and core beliefs and core ways of seeing and understanding what's serving us and what are some core beliefs that are actually getting in the way of our being whole, as a society, but also as me, Niyonu. And believe me, if you read my journal from the last week, you would see some real time stuff that I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm still operating out of this thing that I've internalized.
Throughout the year, the Center for Understanding in Conflict hosts in-depth basic and advanced certificate programs designed to train you to become effective mediators and conflict resolution professionals centered in the understanding-based model. Our training programs have been the gold standard in alternative dispute resolution for 40 years and is popular within the legal community with human resource professionals, ombudsmen, and corporate workplace mediation clients.
And full disclosure to our listeners, the center has been working with Niyonu for around the better part of a year now, in engaging in some of these workshops and some training for the center. And one of the main draws, and of which there were many, but one of the main ones was this going well beneath the surface. And I think there's a lot of folks that are doing different organizational training activities in response to heightened awareness that are a lot of that surface level, more around awareness rather than digging deep, having difficult conversations. And then what I would see most crucially is committing to committing to organizational change. It's not just awareness, but now that you're aware, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to commit to doing about it? And one of the unique pieces of your training that I want to bring up, I know that you're a trained musician. You incorporate music into your work. Would you like to talk a little bit more about your experience as a singer songwriter and how you integrate music and the arts into your training programs?
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you, James. It's probably because music for me is a way of actually understanding the relationship between I'll say it as various energies or various frequencies, or a very concrete person, I would say, as um, various elements. So, I do a lot of organizational development, more traditional strategic planning workshops with board of directors and stuff like that. And whether I'm doing strategic planning, doing organizational assessment, or doing something that's called DEI work, it's all still about what are we giving priority? How are we responding once we see that something is out of alignment? And in music, that shows up as, a note that doesn't fit in the chord, or something that we would say is dissonant. And so the music for me is a framework that I understand the relationship of things. And then there is purely the joy of writing music and singing. So if you were to go to my YouTube channel and listen to the releases that have come out over the last couple of years, the one thing you would know, there's joyful music, there's there's music that is around grief and pain. The thread that runs through all of it, though, is a yearning for well-being and wholeness. And so for me, to tell you the truth, there's not a workshop that I run that we're not up moving our bodies, and whether people call it dancing or just somatic experience, the body's got to be involved. And there's nothing like music to enliven and help us reconnect to that reality. I really feel like separation between the body and mind that's in our culture is one of the first diversity issues that we have.
For our listeners who are new to diversity and inclusion work, do you have some practical steps that they can take to be more mindful and effective in their practice around this work? And I should add intentional, I think would be good to add to that.
Yeah, I'm in the process right now of writing a book that's called Whole System Transformation. And what I'm trying to include in each chapter, at the end of each chapter, is some music examples that relate to content in the chapter, but also very, very specific practices. And so one of them that comes to mind, that I would just mention, if someone were serious about, yes, I will do a practice for the next, let's say, 30 days, would be to take a look at maybe a movie that you've loved and watched maybe more than twice already, but return to it and take a notice of dynamics of diversity. And what I mean by that is what do you notice about gender? What do you notice about race? What do you notice about class? Just jot it down. And this is like without opinion about it, or without, just like I notice, oh, I'm watching George Jefferson on the Jeffersons. I'm noticing everybody has a maid. I'm noticing, so just like jotting those things down and then spread it out a little bit. So that's one distinct movie or something you're going to focus on. Take a look, if you work, just take a look at how the office operates. Who speaks to whom, that type thing. So that what you're doing is just inviting, seeing, or noticing dynamics of diversity. And then the very last one I would invite to expand at another level is just take a look at what's in the news. Sports stories, political stories, anything. Take it and then say, what am I noticing about dynamics of diversity, and what am I noticing about use of power?
This podcast is supported by our CUC Connect members, whose yearly membership includes free attendance to our live monthly webinars, 12 additional featured recordings of past training events, and support from our network of certified trainers for continued professional development. Consider joining CUC Connect today and dive deeper into the understanding-based model.
One point I'd like to explore a little further before we wrap up for today is around liberation. I know that when the center was working with you, and we continue to work with you, this was a concept that really, I think, transcended our base understanding of DEIB in that work, and brings it home in a much broader and more compelling way. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about liberation and then how it works with or maybe distinct from the common understanding of diversity work.
It's funny because it immediately, as soon as you say that, it brings back moments with different clients or workshop experiences where there is, one or two people who feel like liberation, using the word liberation, is the ultimate in what they want to be working for. And it has political connections. It has connections in environments where many of the most oppressed people who have given voice to what it would mean to move out of those oppressed situations, or to transform them and dismantle them, use liberation as the goal. So that's one part, is that there's a solidarity with people across the globe who are working for to be freed of systemic oppression, and liberation sits in those communities. The other is just purely when we think about the joy associated with being fully who you are, being free to be fully who you are. I think of a Nina Simone song, I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free. I wish I could break all these chains holding me. That song like exudes like liberation for me. And so sometimes diversity, inclusion, equity, those words, they're part of the academy in some ways, whereas liberation feels part of the people, most connected from the people.
Okay, last question for you. Looking ahead from the work that you're doing, the changes that you've experienced, or the increase in awareness and interest around this work, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future of diversity and inclusion work, both within your work at Beyond Diversity 101 and in the broader societal context?
We're at this juncture in society where everything that has like juice or energy or the capacity to excite gets pulled into a capitalistic frame so quickly, because it's like, oh, this draws people, it will sell. And I feel like those of us that are alive now, and especially people that are now in their 20s and 30s and coming into this field, what my hope is that we can refine our sensibilities in such a way as to distinguish between what is real and what supports true interconnection, and remembering, and that is exciting and can produce likes. I think it's huge. The gift of the ability to discern is what I'm hoping for us. It's more than a hope. I think it's at the heart of our survival.
Well, thank you so much, Niyonu, for being here today to talk about diversity and liberation, and for everything you do to support those looking to make an impact through participation in your workshops and in the perspective that you help gain, and the healing that you help people to begin in their lives and in the work they do. So thank you so much. It's been a joy to work with you.
Thank you, James. Thank you so much.
Niyonu Spann has more than 25 years of experience as an organization development practitioner, singer, songwriter, and community activator. You can learn more about her diversity and liberation work at www.bd101.org.
Thank you to today's guest for being with us today, and to our CUC Connect members whose support enables the Center for Understanding in Conflict to bring new perspectives in the field of conflict resolution and mediation to you, our listener, in each new episode. You can find out more about today's episode, along with full interviews and additional information about conflict resolution and mediation using the understanding-based model at www.understandinginconflict.org.